Hey folks, this is Scott with SimpleSpider.com. Today we'll be installing CentOS 6 on Oracle VirtualBox. You can see here I've got VirtualBox Manager already started up, and I'm going to go ahead and click New for a new instance. It's going to ask me what name do I want to call this. I'm going to type in CentOS 6 and X64 for 64-bit, and I'm going to call this my base. This is the version I'm going to copy. You'll see right away it shows Linux as the type and Red Hat 64-bit, which is a base of CentOS, or CentOS is a base of Red Hat 64-bit. If I go down here, I could choose another version if that's not what I wanted, but by default it picked that name, or it picked that version based on the name that I selected. I'm going to go ahead and say next here, and then it's going to ask me how much memory do I want to allocate for this instance. We could change this later, but I'm going to go ahead and configure this now for 4 gigs. Again, I won't need this much memory, so you can run it at 512 or a gig, but for my purposes I'm going to go ahead and add 4 gigs because I do have enough memory available to have a larger instance. I'm going to go ahead and say next. It's going to ask me if do I want to create a hard drive. I'm going to say yes, create a hard drive, and I'm going to choose the default VirtualBox disk image and say next. I'm going to choose to dynamically allocate it, say next, and I'm going to make it a 50 gig disk space and say create. That's going to create my instance for me. Now I'm going to right click on this and choose settings, and I'm going to go down to system and processor and choose how many processors do I want to have for this. I've got 8 CPUs on this machine. If you had less, you wouldn't have to add additional CPUs to this VirtualBox. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 to this, and then I'm going to go down to my storage, and you'll see my CD-ROM is listed here. I'm going to go ahead and remove my CD-ROM and actually connect my ISO that I've downloaded. And I'm going to choose CentOS 6 ISO that I've already downloaded. And now I'm going to go into make one more configuration setting change, and that's for my network. My network, by default, it's going to choose a NATed network. I'm going to go ahead and choose bridge. This is up to you whether or not you want to use a NAT or a bridge network. And I'm going to say OK here. And then I'm going to just go ahead and start this instance up. It's going to ask me what do I want to do. I want to install this system. It's going to ask me if I want to check the disk. At this time I'm not going to check the disk. I've already checked this disk. I'm going to go ahead and say skip. Here I'm going to say next in front of the welcome screen. I'm going to say English is my language. My keyboard type is also going to be English, and I want to use basic storage devices for this system. I'm going to discard any data that's on the system currently, and I'm going to give this a base name. From a network standpoint, I'm not actually going to configure any network, but I am going to set this card to be on by default. So I'm going to go ahead and click the edit, and I'm going to say connect automatically and say apply. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say next. It's already set my time zone as Eastern time. That's correct for me, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose next again. And now I'm going to go ahead and set my root password, which is my administrative password, so I'm going to want this to be a strong password. And say next. And then I'm going to tell it to go ahead and use all space. And at this point in time I could say, do I want to review this partitioning layout? I'll go ahead and check that and say yes, let's review it, and say next. And here it's set up the way I want it to be set up. It says I've got 4 gigs of swap space, which is reasonable, and 46 gigs of disk space, and I've got a 500 meg boot partition. So I'm going to go ahead and say next here. And it says, do I want to format that? And yes, I want to format that. And I'm going to write these changes to disk, which is going to set the partitioning. Now here I could set a bootloader password, so I'll go ahead and set a bootloader password. Okay, and that is where I want the bootloader to load to, is that volume. So I'm going to go ahead and say next, and then we're going to see it's going to start installing the packages. This will be a minimal install, so it's not going to install anything extra for me, which is 205 packages for the CentOS 6. So this is, I'm installing this on Oracle VirtualBox. I can install this on VMware the exact same way, or I can install it on physical server the same way. There's not going to be any changes in here as to how this installs here. CentOS is a repackaged Red Hat installation, so anything you can do on Red Hat you can do on CentOS. Or most everything that you do on Red Hat will work the same way on CentOS, and also Oracle's Linux is also a repackaged Red Hat instance, so they're very similar in the commands. So if you're looking up commands for things that you can do on Red Hat, they should work the same way on CentOS. Alright, so now it's going to pop up and say that it's complete, and it's going to ask me, do I want to reboot, and it's time to reboot. So we're going to go ahead and say reboot. Alright, so now it comes up to my login prompt. I go ahead and log in using the password that I've assigned earlier. And I'm going to quickly just check to make sure I got assigned an IP address here. You'll see I've got 192.168.1.129, which is the DHCP for my in-house network. And I'm also going to go ahead and just check to make sure I've got Yum installed. Yum list. And see that everything is working correctly here. Okay, and that's the final step for doing the installation. After you've done the installation, there's definitely post-configuration steps you should take. Watch my other videos to see the rest of this information. Okay, thanks.